Sitting in an empty room, wondering if I'll see soon.
Hey guys, Andrew coming at you, and in this one I have your questions and comments. I'm pumped to speak to you. It may be a little bit early in the morning, but I'm excited to come to you, and I hope that the quality gets to start raising my videos. The song in the intro is one of my own songs called Open. I'll link to the description below, and you can check that out on SoundCloud, and for free for you, you can go ahead and download it. But for now, let's go to your comments. True Persian asks about Netflix. He asks, what are some notable shows that you can remember that are on the Netflix version in the US? There's a lot more like History Channel shows, a lot of like crazy documentaries that you can just like watch and then watch for hours. We get ESPN, and ESPN has like a 30 for 30, and I really like their documentaries on sports athletes, which is a lot of fun. And then there's a lot more AMC shows and just basic cable shows that you can find that are older that are on there. So the library is a little bit more extensive, and it just has to do with the fact that, you know, cable companies probably in Sweden already have deals with a lot of these networks. So that would be the main reason why. We have one here. Tantina Flo says, "Hi Andrew, could you share on how the laundry situation is in Sweden? Being able to do laundry at home is the only thing I dread to compromise. Can you have a washer and dryer in your place? I wouldn't mind my own. I just wonder about the connections. Talk to me, Ken." As far as I know, my apartment, we got to sign up for laundry, and I did a whole video on that, and I can do another one. But most places have a laundry place where you sign up. It's very like important that you sign up. Do it at the time that you have. Do it within that time. And then the other thing I will say is that make sure you empty the linen and clean the room. Otherwise, you're going to be seeing some angry notes. But I know some people that have apartments where they do have all these materials within their apartment, which is awesome. So they do have a washer and dryer and things like that. So I hope that you found that helpful. Feekable asks about investing and says he had some issues using Scottrade and asks what I use. I use Robinhood in the US. It's a fun little app. I haven't had any issues yet, but maybe after this video I'll have some issues. But thank you, Feekable. Sweet Torment says that about learning Swedish, and about that Swedes often like to show off their English skills or like to make it easy on you by speaking English. An immigrant I knew described it as usually doing them a big disservice. This guy was here for 20 years, but everyone at work was speaking English with him until the day he emigrated. He could understand Swedish and speak a little if he had to, but he was not fluent. I can't help but wonder if he ever felt integrated during all these years and if it wasn't the coworkers' fault. Well, look, I never blame other people for things that I need to work on myself. But I did meet a guy just yesterday that is from the UK that's lived in Sweden for 18 years, and his Swedish is amazing. And I spoke to him, and he said as soon as he just started speaking Swedish constantly, he said every time people would come and talk to him, he would just switch to Swedish. He said if they spoke to him in English, switch to Swedish, switch to Swedish, switch to Swedish. It's also finding the time. I'm a runner, and, you know, full-time job runner, and it's finding the time. And then this YouTube thing on top of it, this is something that I feel I need to connect with, but still I need to find the time. And I'm learning now that if I have 10 to 20 minutes a day to just run through words through my head, it gets that Swedish part of my brain working. So that would be another advice I would give for new people coming to the channel. Rebus says, "Hey Andrew, you take criticism well. I tend to get defensive. Swedes like to criticize the way Americans do things. I think it comes from Swedes thinking that what they do is normal. We need to reflect on why we do things the way we do before criticizing others. I think I was born in the US, moved to Sweden at the age of 3, and can't help but get defensive when people criticize Americans, often unfairly." What I'll say about criticism is this. There's two things that you can choose to do when you get criticism. The first thing you can choose to do is just shut off your brain and get defensive. There's a book that I haven't completely finished reading yet, but How to Win Friends and Influence People, and makes a good point about how criticism doesn't work well. There's a little letter in there where Abraham Lincoln, they found a bunch of angry letters that Abraham Lincoln wrote to generals that he never mailed out because they may be retreated from a battle. And I think he had the value of realizing that criticizing them in that moment and not being in their situation wasn't going to help him win the war. And when I get criticism, it's two types of criticism. It could be just like, "Oh, you're a terrible person, I don't like you." And sometimes I get some haters on my YouTube channel, or people in general just write mean, nasty things. I go ahead and delete those channels and don't have a problem blocking people when it's not real criticism, it's just being a mean person, because you know what? I don't need people like that in my life. And with this YouTube channel, I get to choose who I react and deal with. However, just because someone gives me criticism and I don't agree with it doesn't mean that I shouldn't accept that. If I'm going to do that, I'm never going to get better, right? So I got to just take it as it is. I can choose to not listen to it, and sometimes I do that, but I can choose to listen to what they say, take it with a grain of salt, if you will, and try to improve. But let's be honest. I mean, I've been doing YouTube for 8-9 months. I'm doing something right, but I could always get better, and that's just the way my mind works. And you should be confident, but you never want to be overly confident, and always be a humble person. Like, running has always taught me that. I've run marathons, and as I'm running marathons, read people's t-shirts that say on the back, like, beat cancer, or running for someone in their family that had died. And that's such a humbling thing to experience. So I think remaining humble and understanding your situation and not letting things go to your head is really, really important. And no matter who you are, I really think that's something valuable you should consider. Abra says, hey Andrew, you have a great way of explaining questions asked. I'm sure you can go a long way with this channel. Good luck. The salaries in Sweden are much lower than in the US. So does the purchasing power predominantly decrease in Sweden? It's hard for me to say that the salaries are lower. There's higher tax rate, but I mean, Sweden seems mostly like a middle class to an upper middle class society, in the workforce at least. What I will say is that the Swedish kroner did drop. It was higher when I lived here, because I think the U.S. took slower to recover from the 2008-2009 stock market crash. However, now the Swedish kroner is lower. So I guess in a sense, I've made more money every year, but according to U.S. dollars, I haven't. But I don't notice it here. I just noticed it was sending money back. But as I always say, and I really believe with, it has to do with how you save money. You can make $100,000 a year, and if you're spending $99,000 to $100,000 a year, you're still going to be broke at the end of the day. And there's plenty of people that are doctors and just other great professions that are high paying that are broke. They might live in a huge house, they might drive a BMW, but financially speaking, they're not in a good situation. So you always got to have a mindset like that. And like you or anybody else, you can have a side hustle like I do. You can have a YouTube channel, and it's not that there's a ton of money there, but maybe someday there is. You can do things on the side. I like to play music, play gigs. I got my music down there you can check out. I think that's the way to roll with those kind of things. Art Peterson says, just for the fact, Linköping is about 200 years older than Norrköping. That's awesome to know. I didn't know that. And then that makes sense. And that might be why it kind of feels more like a big town. I'm going to work on a video where I talk about Norrköping a little bit more at another time. Ronnie Lindell says, if you use investing Sparkonto, and he puts the web address there, you only pay a low annual flat rate. In 2017, the tax is 0.375% of the value. That's great to know. The U.S. options I have are called I'm going to stick with the U.S. ones for right now, and I could be wrong. I mean, I'm a permanent resident, but I'm also still a U.S. citizen, so I pay the tax on my money here. So I send money home to pay my bills anyways, and plus I have money in the U.S. that I already have invested. And we have two options there. We have a 401k, which is the money isn't taxed at first. You put money in, sometimes companies match that, and then you can invest that into stocks and things like that, and you pay the tax as you send your money out. We also have something called a Roth IRA account, and for some of you, I hope this isn't boring, but how it works is basically you pay tax up front, you put your money in. Once, let's say you've got a couple $1,000s, you can start investing in stocks and things like that, and then boom, you don't have to pay the tax after you sell. The other thing is, as well, is that we have Robinhood, or I use Robinhood, and that's a really easy way to buy stocks where you don't pay a fee. You only pay a fee on your actual capital gains, but you don't have to pay any fee to buy and sell stocks. I like what you're saying about the low annual fee, and it's a very small percentage, and I don't know how it works, and I think if I was in Sweden longer, I would definitely look more into it. But what I'll say is if you're investing in a mutual fund, sometimes mutual funds, you kind of get ripped off because you're already paying a fee for a mutual fund on top of that. And even though that's a small percentage, over a course of like 50 years, it could definitely be a big hit on you economically. I don't know enough about it. I really appreciate you sharing that comment with me. And I'll see, I'll have to see later on what really works. Swedish Metal Bear says, hey there, new subscriber here. Welcome. Swedish American dual citizen by birth, and I've lived for many years in both countries. American mom and Swedish dad finally settled permanently now here in Sweden. And having lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what, Pittsburgh? During the Bush administration, so 10 years now, anywho, holler. I have noticed one big difference on how Swedes date versus how Americans date. Generally in America, when people date, it is expected to be somewhat exclusive, and once you start dating, it is socially frowned upon to date many people. Whereas in Sweden, dates are generally more casual and non-binding. In essence, a date is just a date here in Sweden and usually free from any commitment. It would be really cool if you have noticed the same as me. Anyhow, feel free to reply and have a great date, man. Thank you. I get what you mean about dating. Maybe it's true. I mean, I think Americans were a little bit more old-fashioned. I think that maybe Swedes don't like to commit right away. And I think if you put too much pressure on what makes a date a date, even with my current relationship, there were times where just things got lost in translation when we were dating. Where if we were dating or if we weren't seeing anybody else, maybe in her mind it was super serious. In my mind it wasn't. But then when we would discuss things, it was the same way. And there were times in the past where maybe things would work out or wouldn't work out due to that. And I understand what you mean. I think sometimes the people might think that Americans trying to necessarily lock someone down right away in a relationship. But I have found that if you just kind of relax a little bit, take a deep breath, and go day loomed, it's okay. Everybody has the right, in my opinion, to be able to date, see other people, see what the world has to offer, learn about yourself, because one of the good things is when you start to date people, you're going to find people that work great for you and people that don't, and you get to learn a lot about yourself. And if you can take it a little bit relaxed, maybe a couple months goes by and you see where you're supposed to be. But sometimes maybe if you think about it too fast, it could put a lot of pressure on the situation. So I get where you're coming from. I think that it could be American movies and things that maybe makes it seem like a date in the U.S. is such a big deal. And I also look at it like this: just because you go on a date with a person a couple times, they don't owe you anything. And I'm not saying you're saying that, Swedish Schmiddelbear. So I see where you're coming from, because I've had things get lost in translation. I think that's a lot of it. But at the same time, I feel like once I've kind of relaxed, take things easy, things seem to work out. And just when I was ready to go back to the U.S. and never come back, I met a Swedish girl and everything worked out great and my life is awesome. So and it was only when I started to not really worry about it. Just many comments. Lovely says, hey, I'm also from PA. A lot of people from my hometown finding me on here. This is actually a Pittsburgh Pirate logo, by the way, so now you know. Boom. My mom learned to drive on the left side of the road, and when she got the license, they changed to the right side of the road. Whoa, that's tough. And I wonder if there's still a lot of cars in Sweden that have the driver thing on the opposite side. That would be confusing. I've never driven that way before, on the right side of the car. That's something that would be very, very interesting. So these are all the comments that I have now. If you like that song, you can go ahead and click that link. I have all my links here, so if you're like, hey, I like this guy, I want to continue to see what's up, what can I do to help this guy out? You can like, you can share, you can comment. If you're new, you can subscribe. And if you do, I really appreciate it. Tack för dina hjälpen. Tack för dina hjälpen. Maybe I said it right. And then, you can always check out my music. You like that? My SoundCloud, the song that I just played, you can go ahead and download that. If you made it all the way to the end of this video today, I would really like it if you type in my city's name, because we have some people from that. So if you could type in Pittsburgh, that would be awesome. I would love if you could type in Pittsburgh. Welcome so much to my channel. It really makes me excited every day. I have a lot of fun with this. I'll see you guys in the next video.